going to sing for you a song called Sweet Kingwilliamstown. Now, Kingwilliamstown was the name given to a fairly nice and prosperous market town on the Kerry-Cork border by the British when they colonised Ireland, and they had a habit of naming some of our nicest towns after the kings and queens. And after independence, the names got changed in many cases, and Sweet Kingwilliamstown became Ballydesmond and is known as Ballydesmond to this day. I learned the song Sweet Kingwilliamstown somewhere back on the journey. I'm not quite sure where I first heard it, but it was familiar to me. And I finally decided to learn it. And the reason I did was primarily, there were two reasons. One is that I spent many years in my young childhood with my grandmother in the Sliabh Luachra area of County Kerry, Cork. And it was a place steeped in traditional music, very fond memories of it and of the people that I met there in those young years. And I've always had an affection for the music and for the songs of that area. Also, the theme of the song is essentially emigration, leaving Ireland and going off and ending up in America. And of course, that appealed to me after I went to America and decided to stay there. So that was the general reason that I learned the song. But I didn't really know anything about it at all beyond that. And then about 20 years ago, I was in a festival called Gaelic Roots in Boston, run by the great fiddle player Seamus Connolly, whom I'd known as a young fella in Limerick. He came from about 6 miles away on the wrong side of the Limerick-Clare border in Killaloe. Well, that's my opinion. And I've been great friends with Seamus over the years. He's now living in North Carolina after running a wonderful festival in Boston College, kind of a legendary event that still lives on in many ways, called Gaelic Roots. And myself and Robbie were in the final concert there after spending a week teaching there. We were in the final concert on the Saturday night, and we sang Sweet Kingwilliamstown as part of our set list. And afterwards, a woman came up to me. I'd never seen her before. And she said, I am from Kingwilliamstown. Would you like to know the story behind that song? And I said, of course, I want to know the story. So the story is this. It was written by a man called Danny Buckley. And Danny Buckley was born in 1890 in the town of Boherbue in County Cork. Came from fairly well-to-do people, and they ran a bakery. It was a fairly prestigious trade at that time. And then they moved to Ballydesmond, a prosperous market town on the main road to Cork. And at the age of 22, he was doing okay, but he decided, well, you know, his circumstances might be improved by going to America. So with a number of young friends of his from the same area, and also a cousin of his, Nora O'Leary, they set off for America in the year 1912. And the ship they sailed on from Queenstown, now known as Cove, of course, was the Titanic. Now, when it hit the iceberg, Danny Buckley dressed very quickly and ran through a broken door in steerage. There was actually a door between steerage and first class where the lifeboats were, but the door had been broken. He went in and he found his way onto a lifeboat. And then there were several men there, but men with revolvers, officers, came onto the boat and they ordered all the men off and said they'd shoot them if they didn't go. And Danny Buckley started to cry and sob, and he was on the floor of the boat, and a woman took pity on him and threw her shawl over him. And disguised as a girl, he escaped the Titanic and arrived in New York and settled there. But a month after the Titanic was sunk, the Senate called a hearing on the sinking of the ship. The Brits were furious that it's our ship. Well, America said it was our passengers too. So subpoenaed to appear in front of the Senate hearing was Danny Buckley, the only Irishman actually to appear in that hearing. And it's all on record, can be found to this day. And if you look at a book written by a namesake of mine, Moloney, Sin and Moloney, The Irish and the Titanic, there are about 3 pages given to Danny Buckley, and much of it is quoting his Senate testimony, where the story was, in a sense, dragged out of him. He came back to New York and was known thereafter, ironically, and sardonically, as Danny Buckley the Girl. And who knows what effect that would have had on him as he worked in a hotel. But in 1917, after America joined the First World War, he volunteered to enlist, and he enlisted in the 69th Regiment. There were apparently thousands of Irishmen who were in that regiment, so he was at home, as it were. And he was shipped abroad and served in the First World War. In the last week of the war, on the 15th of October, 1918, he was the last American soldier to be shot, killed by a sniper as he was helping wounded escape the battlefield. The following year, he was taken back. His body was taken back and interred in the cemetery overlooking Ballydesmond, or as it became known a couple of years later. And his cousin Nora O'Leary, she served her time as a domestic in New York, and she didn't really like living there. She decided to go back home, and she saved her money, went back and married and lived to a big age and died in the 1970s, also buried in the same cemetery. And the woman who came up to me in Boston College and told me this extraordinary story, I think it's the most extraordinary story behind any song that I sing, was Sheila O'Leary, a distant relation of Nora O'Leary. Joining me in this in North Carolina is Hayley Richardson, Sweet Kingwilliamstown. My bonny bar floats wild and free across the surging foam. It brings me far from Minish Vale to seek a foreign home. A lonely exile driven far by misfortune's cruel frown. Far from the friends and the land I love in sweet Kingwilliamstown. While here upon the deck I stand, and I gaze upon the darkening shore, fond thoughts arise all in my mind of the land I do adore, of moonlit nights and happy hours, how fast the tears roll down, as I'm thinking on those friends I love in sweet Kingwilliamstown. Shall I no more gaze on that shore, or view those mountains high, or walk along black waterside where I roamed once as a boy, or watch the sun or Knocknabow light up the heather brown, before she flings her farewell beam on sweet Kingwilliamstown. I fondly hope that where'er my footsteps roam, I will treasure deep within my heart fond thoughts and love of home. Fast fades the shore, and on my soul the night comes sadly down. Oh, it's fare thee well, old Ireland, and sweet Kingwilliamstown.